What was your childhood like? Could you tell me about your community?
My book, I always say that, if I go back, I think, maybe my first recollection really is of a domestic violence um, with my mother and her soon to be, well, her husband. Besides pretty much not having much money that I can recall,
Would you say you grew up more like middle class, poor? Like, what would you say?
we were poor.
What would you say is your first experience of violence?
While I was sitting in the back of the car, my mother was sitting there next to her husband. And I don't know if he started. I think for sure he might have smacked her, and then he began choking her, and she was able to get out the car. She was telling me run across the street and call 911. And I remember running across the street. I remember the girl's name the house that I went to. I used to go swim with. Her name was Kim. I ran over to her house. We called 911. By the time I came back, I think he was leaving. He left. When I go back, when I try to recollect my history, the earliest moment that I think I can pull up is that incident. And I don't know if it was because I was that affected by it, but yeah, that's what I remember. And I think maybe at the time I might have been 5 or 6, maybe.
You grew up in gang life. Were you born into that? Were your parents in that? Like, how did that happen?
It was tough being, part of that culture. But I think a lot of times you look for something to belong to. If you're separated from family, you look for that family element. And then, a lot of times, it was kind of glorified in the media that we were seeing. I don't know if that was the intent, the agenda, or maybe they were just making what was popular. But I think that was the reason a lot of people actually, got involved in the gang culture, the drug culture, things like that.
Do you think in movies and like media is the reason why gang life is like an all-time wide and like it's so big at the moment?
As a matter of fact, yeah, I definitely think that the media has something to do with it. Even today, when you have drill music, there's celebrated violence, and then you see the violence behind it. I definitely think it has an effect. I actually did a paper while I was in college on gang violence in LA, and I found that the gang violence in LA was not as bad as it was until after the movie Colors. So it's as if the Hollywood made a movie about this, this gang violence in LA, and then the LA gangs took that movie, and actually the culture imitated the movie instead of usually they say it's vice versa. They say art imitates culture, right? But this worked in reverse, where the culture imitated the art.
Going from that, like, what do you think is the biggest misconceptions people have about gangs?
The biggest misconception, I think, is how those gangs actually started. None of those gangs, well, I can't say none of them because I'm not familiar with all of them. But gangs that I'm familiar with did not actually start off as criminal elements or criminal organizations. They started off as black activists or black activism, where they were responsible for protecting their community, taking care of their community, making sure it was clean, making sure that people weren't being robbed, there were no crimes committed in that area, drugs weren't being sold. A lot of those gangs were created during the civil rights era. So a lot of those gangs were meant, to help black people. And then later on, what happened was the government got involved by you know, introducing crack cocaine. I don't know if you've ever. I think they had a. I don't know if it's a movie or documentary, but it was something talking about how the CIA was shipping in these drugs into these communities. And once they did, and it got in the hands of different people, that became, it led to wars over territory, uh, wars over money, it led to a lot of other things. But yeah, it didn't start off as a criminal organizations, although it became that. So I think that that's a misconception that people have.
Yeah, I'd believe that. For gangs, like a big thing in your neighborhood growing up?
No, no, no. I grew up. Most of my time I've been in the Chicagoland area. And so Chicago is like the motherland, especially for like, disciples and vice lords and other gangs. That's like, the motherland. And so, it spreads out from there. And because I was in that area, it was everywhere in all of those areas, no matter where I was at.
What was a normal day for you like?
Well, it depends on, what time we're talking about.
Let's just say high school.
In high school, I was going to Shiloh Academy on 70th in Michigan. And what happened, usually we would wake up. It was the guy that I went to school with. His name was Absalom. He lived down the street from me. We would catch the bus, and we would already know, catching the bus, there were certain areas that we didn't want to be caught in. We didn't want to be caught in certain areas because if we were, it was likely that something was going to happen to us. And so when we got off the train, we would run because in the area that we got off the train, we didn't want to be caught in that area. So we would run down to a block where we knew our members were at, and then we would walk, and then we would get from there. We would continue running down to wherever we had to go, because we didn't want to get caught. And that was the same thing going back home. That was normal for me. But later on in high school, I was actually living in Rockford, Illinois. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't like you had to worry about those things. And so it was pretty. I was pretty normal in high school in Rockford, Illinois.
Would you say Rockford, Illinois was a safe place for you when you were growing up?
Yeah. It was safe.
Did you join a gang later in your life, or like born into it, or what was that like?
I was born into it, but I took my own journey. From like 14 to 17, I was living in Chicago. Then we moved to Rockford, and when I moved to Rockford, it was much different than it was in Chicago. And then later on, what happened was the organization that I was a member of actually changed the direction of the organization or the gang. We were no longer supposed to be considered a gang, and it came out in our paperwork that the banging mentality had died as of 1984. So even for those years that they were still doing that, people were being misled. We were not supposed to be involved in gang banging at all. Didn't even want us involved in any criminal activities. So by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I was moving in a different direction. I'm a GD. Well, it was a GD. It became growth and development, and our chairman changed, like I said, the direction that we were supposed to be going in. So I didn't I dropped out of school. I actually went back to school to get my GED to study for paralegal, to become a paralegal. I wanted to be a lawyer. We went for that, and it just a number of things changed about my outlook and the direction I wanted to go in my life.
When you change directions in a gang, like what exactly does that mean?
Well, what it meant for us was that we were not supposed to be involved. First of all, the gang banging mentality was supposed to be dead, so it wasn't supposed to be like we see people that we feel are like opposition or enemies,
Hmm.
and try to do anything to them. We were not supposed to be involved in criminal activities at all. So no selling drug, nothing criminal. So you're not selling drugs. You're not doing anything illegal. Everything is supposed to be legal. So it went from being what they would consider a gang to what people should consider as an organization.
But did gang violence impact your family or like your community in any way, you think?
It's definitely caused a lot of pain to a lot of people, and now we live in a time where the leaders of the gangs have pretty much been removed, and so there is no leadership anymore. But you have the I guess the remnants of those gangs where they're without leadership, but they've lost family members. So you'll have people there are still people dying today, going back and forth. It goes back and forth because people are losing loved ones. So you have to think, like, say for instance, 5 years ago, somebody's brother got killed, right? And so
Yeah.
they want retaliation. They'll come back, they'll kill somebody's brother. And so then that family comes back and kills the cousin. And then that cousin family comes back and it's just so now it's a cycle. It's a cycle because they're growing up with this violence, from the
Yeah.
fathers to the sons to the grandsons. Yeah.
Like you said, it going on because African Americans are trying to fight for something. Do you think it's worth it after all of these years of it going on?
I don't know if it's necessarily that they feel that it's worth it. I think the culture, the thing is that people don't want to snitch. The easiest way to end it was be to say, okay, you killed somebody that I love. I'm going to tell that you did it. But instead of doing that, because they don't trust the system, right? They don't trust the
Yes.
judicial system. And so, because they don't trust the judicial system, they are going to play the judge and jury themselves and handle it on the streets. I think that someone that you love and them losing their life is definitely worth some kind of justice. And the community that they're getting is street justice. And I think that's what has to be addressed.
Were you ever afraid that you're gonna get jumped or one of your family members were just gonna get killed one of these days?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
What was that feeling like?
It's interesting. I think that I don't know if a lot of people go through this. A lot of times when life is not as great as you would expect it to be, and I think that's something that has to be addressed in the black community too. Is a lot of people are depressed. You know what I mean? They're depressed because they're growing up in poverty. They don't have much, and people they poor shame you. You don't have haircuts. They talk about you. So you're going through that. Plus, you're going through in a society where you have racism. So now you don't only have poor shaming and you're poor, and but you're also black. And then so people hate your blackness, and you have white people that hate you. And so you're dealing with all of these different things in your environment, these different external pressures, and you start dealing with depression. And so a lot of times you stop caring about life. So there is really you're almost on the verge of where, like, you don't care if you live or die. I don't care really if I live or die. And so I don't think that you have a fear. You know what I mean? You're not fearful because you don't care. And I think that's something else. If I don't care about myself, I definitely don't value your life.
Do you have any role models growing up?
You have role models, but again, you have lifestyles that's glorified. You look at different people as role models, and they may not be, because my uncles, I have phenomenal uncles. One uncle has a PhD. He's a pastor, been principals of several high schools. Never considered him a role model. Maybe now I do, but back then I didn't. Another uncle, they're military men. I think three of my uncles are military men. The two of my uncles are Marino. Wait, one Navy, one Air Force, one Marines. He was an electrician working for a great company his entire life, right? But these people I never looked at as role models because they did not present the look that I was looking for. So you start looking for other role models, whether it be rappers, athletes, drug dealers, because they have the things that make they have the things that you consider desirable. Um, because that's what society is teaching you. Society teaches you that if you don't have certain things, that you don't have value.
Compared to now, is just how you view things.
Well, back then, it was pretty much money. If you had money and you had a nice car and jewelry, so you just look for people that had that, and those became role models. Now, now when I look back, the people that I overlooked should have probably been my role models more so.
So if they were rappers, NBA stars, people of that kind of sorts, that was kind of who you looked up to.
Scarface, people like, yeah, even movies, people from movies, they became people that you look to. Like, that's why if you ever notice, I don't know if you ever notice a rapper's house, you look at a rapper's house, they always have a picture of Scarface or the Godfather. You ever seen this? Just look, if you look at it in most rappers' houses, you'll see that, because those were people that they looked up to. They felt like Scarface was the ultimate gangster.
Scarface, like a rapper, or who is he?
I know the movie Scarface.
Oh, I'd never heard of it.
You've never seen the movie? You should watch the movie Scarface.
I'll check it out.
One a role model for me, and I think that was why I was able to make the changes that I made. Was Larry Hoover? If you've never heard of him, he was considered a gang leader, and because his teachings were that we were supposed to go in a different direction, and I looked up to him, even though I never met him. You know, I've seen things that he's written. I've heard stories about him. I've never met him. He was a role model for me. So when he said that it was time to make a change, and he had us really look at ourselves as it teaches that if we're not part of the solution, then we're part of the problem. And so we no longer want to be part of the problem. We wanted to become a part of the solution. So now the people that I didn't listen to or look at as role models before, I look at them now as role models because I understand what they stood for.
Talking about like drugs and alcohol in your life, when would you think that got started?
Probably about the time I was let me see, maybe 14, 13 years old.
So when you became a teenager, basically.
Yeah, yep.
Why did you start drugs and alcohol?
I don't really know. I don't know if it was, I can't say it was necessarily peer pressure. I think it was just trying to grow up too fast, knowing that was something that adults do. And so, I wanted to try it. And then maybe also because it was something that I grew up around, you know, a number of people in my home, were drinking. There was alcohol around, I can't say I recall anyone using drugs. And I don't know if I started smoking weed immediately. I might have started smoking weed when I was maybe 15. And that might have been peer pressure. I think that might have been peer pressure. Other people were smoking. They were like, "Oh, come on, smoke." And I was like, "Okay." And I tried it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how I started smoking weed.
What do you mean that you wanted to grow up fast? Were you just wanted to be like cool, or like what do you mean by that?
Well, yeah, I guess, adults were drinking, there was alcohol around me. I saw all the adults drinking alcohol, and to me, it seemed like they were having a good time. So I wanted to indulge myself, in alcohol to find out, what it was that made them drink it, And a lot of times people do things that are prohibited, or just because it's like bucking the system, being rebellious. So that was probably why I started drinking. And then, I started to enjoy it because it gives you a high, you get a buzz.
Did your life ever turn good or bad?
Alcohol definitely made my life horrible, actually. Um, yeah, it was it's definitely not something that you want to deal with as alcoholism.
Was there a specific time or like a moment that you realized that there was an issue?
Yeah, yeah. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and I went to this club. I was just there for maybe like a week, and I decided to go out to the club. I went to this club down the street from me, and I started drinking. I think I had a beer. I think I had a pitcher of beer. At first I was like not going to get drunk. Told myself I'm just going to have a pitcher, and then I had a pitcher of beer, and people started coming in. I was meeting new people. I think I had another pitcher of beer, and more people started coming in. I got maybe a couple of shots of Hennessy, and when I left out of the club, I was wasted, and I fell in an alley, and for a while I couldn't get up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if somebody comes along right now, they will be able to do anything to me, and I would actually not even be able to prevent it because I can't even move my body. For a while, I just laid there. Then finally, I was able to get back up, and I made it to the hotel and got in the room. And when I got in the room, I started throwing up, and I couldn't even make it to the bathroom. I was actually laying on my back, throwing up out of the side of my mouth, and I could have died. And I realized at that moment that all the other times I had been drinking or I had alcohol or I had been drunk or whatever, there was always someone else there. I just at that point in time when that I experienced that, I just never wanted to be that drunk again. So I still had alcohol for a while after that, but I tried to control it more. And then maybe about 3 years ago, and I just didn't really enjoy it anymore. I realized why I did it, and I just stopped. And then now I drive trucks, so I don't drink at all. I don't smoke weed or anything.
Over time, did you ever develop any enemies growing up, or like just as an adult or any time like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you remember like when you kind of got your first enemy?
The first one I had, it was a guy that was across the street from my school. We were in different organizations, at different gangs. But we were cool because we were on the same street, so they kind of didn't mess with us. We didn't mess with them. But one day, I think in school we had gotten into an altercation with somebody that he knew, and so when I came out of school, he was kind of messing with me, and so I went to some of the people that I knew um, to get a firearm, to get a gun. And the next day when I came to school, I brought it with me, and my intentions was if he messed with me today, because this was the life we were living. If he messes with me today, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shoot him. So yeah, that was my first, I would say, enemy. But that was all squashed after that. He talked to me and everything was, everything was everything.
Is having an enemy, how you landed in prison in the first place?
No, uh, um, I landed in prison because of drugs, selling drugs.
Like, how did that happen? If you don't mind explaining that to me.
How did I get locked up?
Yeah, how did you get locked up and go to prison?
Um, what had happened was I had like I said, I went back to school. I was going to school to be a paralegal. But what had happened was I lost my job and I had to pay my rent. And I think I was behind. I needed some money. I didn't know what else to do. Well, yeah, I didn't. Well, let me not say I didn't know what else to do. I was just never the type of person to go ask anybody for anything. And so I went and did the easiest thing I knew how to do. I got some drugs to sell, and I was at this building, and this guy, for whatever reason, because I never did anything or anything, he calls the police and tells the police that I have a gun on me, right? And
Hmm.
so they stop me and they pat me down for the gun, but they can't go in your pockets. I was in school to be a paralegal, so I'm knowing that they can't go in my pockets because I'm not under arrest, right? So they pat me down. They say I don't got a firearm, and then they looked up something. They looked up, to see if I had any warrants, and it came back that I had a warrant. The warrant was not valid, but it didn't matter because it was under the Good Samaritan rule. I think that's what it's called, or no, good faith. And good faith. There was a good faith rule. And so because they found the drugs based on the good faith rule, the charges stood. But yeah, that's how I caught my first case.
When you got to prison, what was the hardest thing you had to adjust to when you got settled in?
Just being locked up. You know what I mean? Being locked up is it's uh it's a horrible experience. When you're in a small, confined to a small space, and you without your freedom. You don't have your freedom. You start missing things that you usually don't think about when you're free. You know what I mean?
Like what?
Taking out the trash, washing dishes for my mom, cutting the grass, just simple shit that you can no longer do.
Was being in prison harder than being in a gang, you would say?
Was it easier in prison?
Yeah, like which one was harder in your opinion?
Oh, prison,
Prison?
prison, yeah.
Was it just not being able to do stuff, or like what was so hard about it?
Don't misconstrue, if I mentioned before that jails or prisons in Illinois, they have changed. They're not as rough as they used to be. It's still a horrible place to be. You don't want to be in a situation where you can
Mm.
find in a something the size of a room, the size of a bathroom with another man, where they're taking a dump and you're right there, you're eating there. Someone's controlling your every movement and everything you do. Your entire day is controlled. You definitely want your freedom, but it's not as rough as it used to be in the state of Illinois now. It could be
different, depending on the state and how much control system has taken back from the inmates.
Before you said it was different.
Inmates had more freedom. There were, drugs that was getting in. They were, having sex with the guards and even pretty much conjugal visits. When women came in, there was much more violent. There were more deaths, more violence, and things like that. So it was much more different. There was rape, rampant in the Illinois prisons. Sexual abuse, things like that. So it's not the same anymore.
I've been with my wife for almost 27 years now, and she was with me during that time. It was very difficult being away from her, and so those things. And then you never know, what might happen to you. You know, and there people will try you. Uh, you know, and you don't know if you're gonna make it home. Prison is a place where you may die any day. Um, depending on where you're housed at. you know. So that was a thing too. Now, when I got to the next prison, because I got disciplinary, you know, I got shift for disciplinary reasons. When I got to the next place that I went to, Shawnee, Illinois, they used to call it the Gladiator School. That was much worse. That was like, that was much worse. But it wasn't as bad. But I even went to a max prison, and I've heard people get raped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just um I've never had those issues. It could be because of my affiliation with an organization. You know what I mean? Where because it's other members. You know what I'm saying? So if you do something, we have security. So other people. If you don't have that, then you may have to deal with that. But I never had to deal with it. But I had my share of fights and stuff like that. But
After everything, how long did it really take you to rebuild your life, in a sense?
After getting out of prison or after being an alcoholic?
Just in general, like how long did it take after gangs and life and everything? Like when you decided to get better, like how long did it take you?
It took no time. I think that it's a process, but once you make the decision, you start moving toward a certain goal, down a certain path. You start to see things that are happening better in your life, whether that's in relationships, jobs, at home and abroad. You know what I mean, with family and friends. You start to see the changes. So it's an immediate change. You just have to start moving in that direction.
Did you have any triggers that you had a hard time staying away from?
Yeah, I have triggers, or I had triggers, and I probably still do. Um, a lot of times, my triggers are, when I reminisce on, people that I've lost. Um, and a lot of times, I have a tendency to hold myself to. I'm my worst critic. So anytime that I feel I'm not doing good or I'm not making good decisions, or I've hurt someone, those things can trigger me.
Before you said that you and your wife, I believe, have a truck business or something. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we're team truck drivers. We're entrepreneurs. We're landlords. We own 2 properties. But yeah, we're team truck drivers. We travel the entire United States. Right now, I'm in Arizona, I believe. I just left California. Right now, I'm in Arizona. I'll be going back to California tomorrow.
Do you like that job, or would you recommend
I
something
love it.
else?
I love it. I love it. When I was younger, one of the things I wanted to do was just travel the United States. Whether it was walking, hiking, or riding a bike, I wanted to travel the entire United States. Now I actually get paid to do that. I get to see. I've seen just this week. I think we've been from Florida. Did we go to Florida this week? Maybe not. But last week we went from Florida to California. Then we left there. We went to Denver. Then we went to Washington, Spokane, and from there we went back to Pennsylvania. So we get to see everything, and experience a lot.
Yeah, it seems like a really cool job. What made you and your partner want to do this?
Well, the truck driving, like I said, traveling was something that I always wanted to do. But my wife's father, he was a truck driver, and he would always, try to encourage them to go and get their CDL, because of the money that he was making. And then also he wanted to, he was a business owner. So, he had his own truck, was running his own business. So she decided to do it. And then later on, I decided to go and pursue it and get my CDL so that we could drive together.
To anyone going through just any abuse, gang life, just anything you literally just went through, what would you guys say to them?
First of all, always put God first. Have a relationship with God. That's first and foremost. And determine what success means to you. Do not allow the world to define for you what success is. Just because another person's success may be a big house and cars and money, that does not necessarily have to be yours. Yours could be, like I said, hiking the United States and South America. And don't fall for peer pressure. Don't allow people to make you feel that you have to be or act a certain way. Be you and have some values and principles and stand on those.
Hey guys, what's up? What up? Hey, how's your day going? Shoot. Basically, you know me. I'm Ronick. I was gonna just say thank you for checking this out. I don't know what that little intro before was, but thanks for checking it out. I tagged Bosco down in the description. As always, you should know this by now. But anyways, it's down in the description if you want to check them out. Just a little note. This is a little note for all the companies out there. Basically, not that the show will be stopping anytime soon. I have multiple episodes lined up, but I got an internship or a mentorship, I guess technically. So I'll be doing some stuff there for at least the summer. So if the company does see this, I just want to tell you, I'm not gonna change it, but I hope this doesn't ruin the chance because I do swear sometimes, but I try to keep it professional. So if you see this, if you are checking this out, I hope you can accept that, and I'll try to keep it PG as much as I can. Have a good day, guys, and I'll see you next Wednesday.